Good morning, everybody. When I was coming up this morning, I thought that maybe we'll have an empty room here because everybody was exhausted from 2 days, very intensive days of the Munich Security Conference, and I saw some bars and the soccer tournament going into very, very late hours, but I'm very happy to have a full house here, and we also have a lot of followers online following this event today. This is not the first time that we have, as we call them, substate actors on stage, because substate actors are very important to achieve the objectives that we set on state level, on global level. They have become more important, and I come to that in a second. But since they have this important role, I said we give them a stage here. We started last year. First time we had it with mayors from cities, where the local administration, the political landscape in the country is such that the cities are in opposition to the central government. And we said, well, how can these cities then survive? How can they manage? How can they have access to funds if the central government tries to cut funds off them? Not to have too much controversy, I won't recall the cities we had last year. But in any case, we are here for substate actors this year. Catherine, you will introduce them.
I will.
I'm so pleased to have all of you here. It's really an honor to have you. Let me mention the Deputy Minister for Economic Cooperation, Niels Annen, who is also helping. I think in modern German we say he's partner here. You know what this means, so thank you very much for doing this. Substate actors, when you all went through COVID, I mean, you can decide in the capital, this is our policy, but somebody has to implement it. And I know, for instance, Governor Murphy for 2 years was directing this from his home back and had to cover the state of New Jersey, which is half of Germany, and you have to manage it on state level. And maybe say something about this, but also the overarching goal of fighting climate change. How do we green our cities? How do we green our states? This can be decided on a national level, but it has to be implemented and managed on a state level. So these actors are key, and I'm very, very happy and feel honored that you are ready to do this, and on a Sunday morning where usually you probably do other things. So thank you very much for coming, and Catherine, you take over again. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman Heusgen. I think it speaks to a recognition of the security conference that we have seen over the last 20 years, but over the last 7 years in particular, an acceleration and an urgency for the role of subnational actors, of cities in taking on transnational challenges. Because you're absolutely right, everything that you've described, these transnational problems, they take on a different urgency when coupled with density. And I'll remind you, by 2050, 68% of us will be urban dwellers, and that urban development will be exceedingly fast in the global south and in places that are now feeling very much the impact of the war in Ukraine without necessarily feeling that they have the tools to negotiate and to reapproach these problems from a coherent perspective. And where we're then seeing action is on the city and subnational level, because cities have discovered their interests and they have discovered their power. So since we're at the Munich Security Conference, this will be, in effect, a conversation about power. But we are now in a moment of war and deep crisis that has these resonant effects. And of course, cities have been the locus of war and conflict since the dawn of time. Our cities were our nation states at the beginning of time. But in World War II, when 40% of that conflict was urban, we decided through the Geneva Convention, through the International Committee of the Red Cross, that we needed to protect the most vulnerable in warfare. We needed to protect our civilians, our civilian infrastructure, our women and children. And now we see a war that is designed not to conquer cities in a last moment, but in fact to target cities. Because the war in Ukraine is a war against civilization. And where does civilization live? It lives in dense urban areas. It lives in our cities. Our history is there, our human connection is there, our life is there, our critical infrastructure, our schools, they're in cities. And it is no mistake that the Russian dictator has gone after cities, kidnapping 45 mayors, starting with the root of what makes us human. So I want to turn first to Vladimir Klitschko. His brother, of course, is the mayor of Kiev, but both have shown incredible fortitude for their people. He's an entrepreneur, he's a philanthropist, he's a business leader, but most importantly, I think in this moment, he's a patriot and a supporter of his people and his country. And he's been vociferous in trying to get aid directly to his people and to the cities that need it. And I wanted you to share with us what you've seen, how cities have come to the aid of one another in this moment of crisis, and what your hopes are for that particular human-to-human connection going forward. So, Vladimir Klitschko.
Good morning. I am Vladimir Klitschko, not Vitaly Klitschko. I'm not the mayor of the city of Kiev. Even though I'm in the city of Kiev, people are coming to me, approaching me and saying like, that needs to be rebuilt, that help needs there, and so on and so on. And I'm trying to explain that I'm not the really right person to talk to because I was not elected by you guys. But, well, let's say you look alike and we know you're connected, so pass the message. I said, I got it. So I will pass the message. And so whatever I say, I just want to say with that, don't take it as like official statement, all right? Because only the mayor can say more particular things and stand for it. And obviously, as the citizen of the city of Kiev, I have experienced 2014, and you're totally right in what you said, how important the cities are. 2014, 13 and 14, when the Revolution of Dignity started and our Maidan movement and the beginning actually of the Russian invasion in 2014, I remember how city functions and lives. And I remember when the military and police forces were attacking us back then, people who were demonstrating and standing for the rights of being associated, back then associated with European Union and living under democratical principles, how city was functioning when at night with this loud action explosions of the ammunition that police was using and the military was using to try to scare us, how city was functioning. It's unbelievable how the connection, without even knowing each other, we were one ecosystem that was operating very rapidly. operating and reacting and defending ourselves, and especially defending what we're standing for. It's not to describe with the words, but I still remember the memories and impressions that have received back then, how, as I said, how even people that were traveling from other cities, as Odessa and Lviv and Kharkiv and Dnipro, so they traveled to Kyiv, to the city of Kyiv, and they were part of our ecosystem, even though they were from different cities. But there was certain unity, and this unity we're still having, and it got even stronger through the years. And now in 2022, in the past year, when the invasion has escalated and Russia attacked us, not just some cities as Lugansk and Donetsk, and with annexation of Crimea in 2014, we have a full-scale invasion of the country. And one more time, back to city of Kyiv, the capital. We've been very fortunate that the city was not circled by the Russian military forces. If city of Kyiv would have been conquered, I think we wouldn't have Ukraine now. That's matter of fact. If you own the capital, if you own,
Right.
like if you have control of the city, you have control of the country.
Yeah.
And we were on the edge of it. I would say, on one hand, there was luck. On the other hand, not to get into details, luck is also something that is not just happening just like that, but there are certain people who are playing key roles that it not happened, and thankfully to our military that have defended us. And it is also important that in this case, I will speak about my brother as the mayor of Kyiv, how he was protecting his own people, and actually him not leaving the city, as President Zelensky, not leaving the city, not leaving the country, but staying there. And that played a huge role of other people showing resistance, men and women. And I've seen lots of women, the citizens of the capital, that were protecting their families, their children, with weapons in their arms. And speaking of the capital and the mayor, he's also the president of the Mayors Association. And you're right, there are a lot of mayors that have been captured, kidnapped, killed.
Yeah.
As mayor of the satellite city of Kyiv, just right in the beginning of the invasion of Gostomel, that's right on the border line of the city of Kyiv. And while he was helping his own people to evacuate, so he was killed. And this unity is extremely important between the cities that exchange experiences, exchange information, exchange a lot. And it's, you cannot stop life.
Yeah.
And we know that, as a matter of fact, especially when people are connected with each other. I can speak about it a lot with different experiences that I've collected, as I said, on one side, being as a regular citizen, so to speak, of city of Kyiv and Ukraine, and of the free world as well. But knowing the situation and being aside of my brother in all those critical times, obviously there is a lot to share and explain, but I don't want to take too much time of it. So please excuse if my monologue was full.
Well, we thank you for being here, because we know that you're, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We know that your brother wanted to be with us, but we've also been watching the news very closely. We've been seeing what's happening the last 2 days. It's been remarkable that he's been able to be here for so long. I know he has to go home right now, so we're very grateful for you to share that really vivid and lived experience. I haven't introduced individually my panel to you. I'm going to do that when I ask them the questions, in part because we're waiting for the outgoing mayor of the city of Prague, Stena Kryb, who came to Ukraine just about a month ago with what was the nucleus of the Pact of Free Cities. The 4 Eastern European cities who bonded together. Christoph Heusgen raised it in part to defend their urban democracies when they were squeezed by governments who were making their lives difficult and to uphold the flame of urban democracy, but also to get things done during the pandemic. Nina has some very vivid stories of how cities across the world exchanged knowledge, know-how, understanding of how they were going to get vital equipment for their urban citizens. And we also had that on the state and national level. If you look at America's Pledge, that was the union of states and cities and companies to uphold the US commitment to the principles of climate change when a federal government decided to move the United States out of those obligations. So I want to go next to Niels Annen, who has in his personal life, effectively, in his professional life, has had an interesting bridge structure from diplomacy now into development. He's the parliamentary state secretary, working now on the wider development portfolio, but comes to this from the lens of foreign policy and understanding of how these power shifts are taking place. I find that very simpatico because I too ran a Future of Diplomacy project, but I also worked for Mayor Bloomberg, and so that's my dual lens to this. And I want to welcome outgoing Mayor of Prague, Mayor Hryb. So welcome in our round. Thank you for being here. But Niels, I said originally going in that this is a conversation of power, about power, because roughly in the last decade, I diagnose what I call the 5 Ds of urban power and how they're renegotiating that with the nation states. Of course, the power of demography. We heard powerfully about when citizens stick together, the capacity to absorb others, the capacity to attract others that can do more, the innovative capacity of cities, what Richard Florida calls the 3 Ts, but then also dollars or yen or euros, whatever you may. But our cities are our economic nodes. They connect one another when we're dealing with supply chain hiccups. Who feels it first? The citizens, the residents, the businesses that work in cities, and then they have to see how they can use their own power to renegotiate and quote unquote get back to delivering those essential services. Democracy. 45% of our citizens are unhappy with their national leadership. Well, mayors still come in at a 69% popularity rating. The Pew Research survey found that 72% of Americans in our deeply divided country think that cities are the incubators of solutions, that is where democracy can find itself again. And then we were talking about this data, and I want you to reflect a little bit on that. I think part of the way that cities have networked themselves in C40 and through the Global Parliament of Mayors, what undergirds that is an exchange of experience, proof of concept, and data. They know how to address these transnational problems and make those comparative. And then finally, the main issue we'll talk with Nina about is diplomacy, this idea that they're connected, and in this rich interconnectedness of subnational actors lies a new version of power, how to influence the nation state, how to influence the multilateral architecture. And you've had the front row seat to how that's come together over the last couple of years. So Niels, as you're thinking about, and I should say, Niels is and has been for a long time the member of the Bundestag from Hamburg-Eimsbüttel, a place very close to my heart, but a city that had a long-standing partnership with St. Petersburg in Russia, and shifted very quickly and built a very functional relationship with Kiev. And I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that as well. So Niels.
Catherine, thank you very much. So much to say, but please allow me, first of all, Vladimir, to say that we are also the citizens in my city, and I know you have a deep relationship with Hamburg as well. Are very impressed about what you, your brother, the people of Kiev have been achieving. And it was not only, left by an expression of solidarity. And you mentioned that our mayor established very quickly a relationship. And I think if you look what we did and it's just one example out of many on the regional and the city level, what we did was very concrete. For example, cooperation between our water supply company in Hamburg and that in Kiev. We have been able to, because of the close contact, to identify the real urgent needs. There is no need for a massive federal bureaucracy to find out what is needed on the ground. Generators, for example, firefighters, etc. So you may ask, what does it have to do with us in the federal government or even the German Development Corporation? What I believe it's interesting that Germany and Ukraine established, before the war happened, a very close relationship. We have been working with our partners. We have been investing in, and I know, Mr. Klitschko, that has been difficult in Ukrainian politics as well, but we invested in and helped with the decentralization in Ukraine. And I believe what you are seeing today, the brave mayors, the leaders of the communities who have been organizing the defense of the cities and territory, it has something to do with the legitimacy because they are elected. And we made a contribution, a modest contribution, of course, to make that happen. So we can build on that, and that's very important. We have set up a support platform for German communities. Before the war, we had 70 sister cities and regional partnerships between Germany and Ukraine. Now we have 124, and we have a long waiting list, if I may use that word. And we, from the federal government, we are helping also German cities if there's a need to finance a certain initiative. That's a political message, but it's also very practical help. And I believe it's underlining what you're asking in your question. Cities have a role to play in our relationship, which is so crucial right now, but it's going above the question of Germany and Ukraine right now. It's a global question. If you just look at the numbers, we will in very few years see that more than 70% of world population will live in metropolitan areas. And it means that the global problems, also the SDGs that we want to achieve, and we are falling behind, to be honest, in a dramatic way. We can only succeed if we use the innovative potential of cities. And the networks are already there. It's not only, it's important, I did that for a living, but it's not only the big, diplomacy and what you're also seeing here in the Munich Security Conference. Mayors have been building their networks.
Yes.
They are influential actors, and they can present solutions. And that's why we are, for example, supporting UN Habitat. They are setting up an accelerator lab, UNITAC, to provide data, available data. We need to understand that, yes, if you have a good solution for your city, that's great, but it can maybe contribute to another city's solution effort, maybe even in a different continent.
Right.
So I'm very happy also to Chairman Heusgen that we have that discussion here because it's also security related.
It is, absolutely. And this idea of networks, and before you came and joined us, Mayor Grib, I should say you're the outgoing mayor of Prague, but in terms of what Niels Annen just said from the Pirate Party, this idea of the necessity of forming networks, this idea that cities are the pragmatists that can cut through the political fray and can deliver proof of concept. I mean, that was essential when you built the Pact of Free Cities. I want you to share with this audience what the nucleus of that was. But I also note that you were in Kiev with the originators of the Pact of Free Cities just a month ago. And I want you to reflect on what that trip and your connection has meant to alleviating some of what's going on in this anti-civilizational war that we see going on in Ukraine. So over to you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much, and sorry for the late arrival. I had problems with my badge because I arrived just recently. However, yes, well, there are two levels on what we should focus on. First one is the pragmatic level. That means, for example, the humanitarian aid, the direct help and cooperation between the cities, and so on. But there is also another level, and that is a value-based level. And there is a lot of networks that are focused on a pragmatic level of cooperation, be the Euro cities or many other networks that are focused on a certain thing or more broader cooperation, but on a pragmatic level. But Pact of Free Cities that we have founded originally on a platform of V4 capitals in 2019 is something different. It's a value-based pact. And I believe that specifically in those times, it is important to say that the values are important. The democracy and freedom does not come as it is. Yeah. It's something that you have to fight for. It's something that you should emphasize, and therefore we have founded a Pact of Free Cities to show that the cities are also at the forefront in this battlefield for these values. We have founded it as a V4 capital, so that means Budapest, Bratislava, Prague, and Warsaw. However, right now, a lot of other cities have joined, not just from Europe, but also worldwide. And just recently, Kyiv has
and now the mayor of
joined.
Munich, just 2 days ago, right here at this conference.
Yes, exactly. So the pact is even growing more and more. And so I would like to emphasize that it's also not just about a pragmatic level, but also about the value-based level.
And can you say 2 more words about why that was important in the genesis? If you looked at the political surround, Krzysztof Heusgen said he wouldn't mention who he sat with last year, and I was a part of that discussion as well. But it was Mayor Tchaikovsky, it was, quote unquote, some of your co-founders, Gerli Karashoin. And why was that important, and why does that continue to be important? I talked about democracy as one of the powers of cities.
Well, we have founded the Pact of Free Cities in 2019. In 2019, the situation in V4 region was slightly different than it is right now. However, specifically in Czech Republic and Slovak Republic, some change had happened since then. However, in Poland and Hungary, the situation remains, I believe, more or less the same. So I believe still the pact has its value. And I believe that the value of the pact is even growing as we see how the world is changing right now. Because the pact is based on support for the liberal values as opposing to xenophobia and anti-liberal tendencies or populism and so on. And you could see those things are growing. Not just in Eastern Europe, but you could see them, let's say, worldwide. And that's why the values are important also in those days. We have also been to Kyiv not just on January, when we had visited Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, and to show our support to Kyiv. And also we brought promises of future help to Kyiv from our cities. However, we have visited also Kyiv 9 days before the invasion, and this level of showing the support, I believe, is also very, very important.
We'll talk a little bit about how that then influences the European stage in our second round of questioning, but I should say, and I'm going to go to Nina and Governor Murphy here in my next questions, nobody knows a town hall better than the people around this room. And so since it's supposed to be an interactive format, after I finish this round of questions, the questions will be yours. And these people are well briefed to engage in a town hall. Perhaps no one better in that regard than the former deputy mayor of Los Angeles, but who was Ambassador Nina Hachigian, because she was previously the ambassador to ASEAN, and has just moved back into a national function that essentially bridges, for the first time in the history of the United States, the dialogue between the cities who were at the front lines of a number of these issues, bringing home diplomatic intelligence, bringing home things that are vital potentially to the diplomatic stewardship and decision-making process of the United States of America, and putting that in dialogue. And we just saw yesterday Secretary of State Blinken from the stage here, but for the first time, you had a Secretary of State address the Conference of Mayors. You had a US president who, before he took office, in various formats talked to mayors and governors, I think 9 times before his inauguration, because his plan was to transform the country. And you can arguably only do that if you deliver. for and with the country. So Nina, yours is a very particular function. Can you talk us through why we needed this office in the United States? Niels will be listening very closely because urban diplomacy is in our coalition treaty. They put it in there, and we're working very hard on realizing that. So welcome, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's great to be with all these esteemed panelists. So you've heard already that mayors and governors are on the front line. They're on the front line during the pandemic. They're on the front line of democracy. They're on the front line of climate change. And they feel these transnational threats in their cities and in their states, and they're protecting their people from them, but they're also working on addressing all of them. So, so I think that there was some interest amongst mayors and governors in creating a position like mine, and that dovetailed with an interest of an administration to deliver foreign policy for the middle class and for all Americans, which you can't do unless you really are connected to them at the local level. And in terms of power, I was thinking about that as you were saying it. I think climate and democracy actually are two places where you really see the power at the subnational level. That the biggest contribution that wasn't national at COP26 was a coalition of 1,000 mayors, over 1,000 mayors, who said that they all were going to get to net zero by 2050 and half by 2030, and many of them are on their way to doing that. Compared to nation states, which the record is not quite as rosy. So you can see that there is just a lot of, that mayors have to, and governors have to put it in the ground. They have to actually make it work. And so my job is severalfold, but one is to just encourage and help mayors and governors do more overseas and connect to great cities that are here in Germany and elsewhere around the world, cities and states and provinces and regions. It's a paradox about the United States because we're a big country, so there's actually a lot that goes on internationally from enlightened or just active mayors and governors, especially those that have had diplomatic experience. But in general, they are not nearly as well resourced as their European counterparts, as their Asian counterparts. I mean, Tokyo has 50 people doing international affairs. And when I was deputy mayor of LA, we had 7. And that was considered to be a huge office in the United States context. So, so my job is to find capacity, to find resources, to find and to provide advice. We have a great cadre of experts in the State Department who can answer any question about any any place and any issue, pretty much. So that's another way that we can that we connect. And then to in general, encourage my State Department colleagues to think in subnational terms, because if you want to move the needle on some issues, you have to talk to mayors and governors.
Yeah.
And I no longer use the term subnational in my title. I've changed it to mayors and governors because some were offended by the title sub. They don't feel sub.
We'll make sure they change it next year here at the MSC too.
No worries.
No, I mean, so you've heard it from, I think, everybody here. Power, leadership, proof of concept, data, pragmatism, getting it done. Governor Murphy, you were ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany during the Obama administration. And then when you came to New Jersey, you were just reelected, so congratulations,
Thank you
November.
very much.
And all these themes resonated when I read through your record and what you tried to push. Christoph Heusgen brought it up, New Jersey's COVID response, a data-driven COVID response. But when I speak to my colleagues in the German Foreign Office, and they're getting ready potentially for an election in 2024. And I said, are you using your consulates? Are you using different connections to different parts of the country better? Because power in the United States, too, is moving increasingly to the state level. All of our big problems are being renegotiated there. But also everything that Nina said in terms of progress, pragmatism, and proof of concept is happening at that level. So can you reflect on how does it feel as a governor in the interaction with your federal counterparts and the roles that you want to play moving forward?
Honored to be here with this esteemed group. Niels and the Klitschko brothers I've known since 2009. You were fighting then and you're still fighting, so and it's an honor to be with you. And I think this position, Nina, is a home run for our endeavors. I was reflecting on Tokyo having 50 people. We have one guy and a dog.
What does the dog do? No, I'm sorry.
Listen, I think I happen to also be chair of the National Governors Association. We had our yearly summit last weekend. We were with the president, vice president, and the administration. And I made the statement in the White House that we are best when it's and both. I don't think this is an either or.
Yeah.
We're not trying to do diplomacy at the expense of the Biden administration, and they're not trying to run our state. But there's no reason why you can't have a 1 + 1 = 3 result. And we take the global opportunity very seriously. So we just met with the South Korean foreign minister. We're about to meet with the Irish foreign minister. We were in Ukraine, my wife and I, on Wednesday with refugees from the East and meeting with officials there. There's no reason why you can't have that and both reality. It does matter, and having lived through both several years of the Trump administration and now happily 2+ years of the Biden administration, it does matter who's in charge at the federal level. So there's an and both 1 + 1 = 3 opportunity when you're all swimming in the same direction. You have the similar values, Mayor, when you have objectives that are lined up. When you don't, COVID being a good example of this, you've got to tack in and compensate. And the good thing about being a mayor, about being a governor, is you have that latitude. You can either add to the endeavors or you can push back on those endeavors, whatever you think is relevant for your residents. New Jersey, for those of you who don't know it, is plus or minus the 10th largest American state, both in population and economic heft. It is, ironically, the most densely populated American state, and yet has 565 townships. So at one level, we're a city-state like Hamburg.
Right.
And at another level, we are atomized. And I think each has huge attractions and huge challenges, and we try to capture the best of those worlds. Again, it's an honor to be here.
Can you speak specifically, I mean, first of all, there's wonderful, rich cities within, and then you have an incredible array of universities. I mentioned the effectively alliance to stop climate change, or stop the American calamity that was pulling the plug on climate change. And I'll note, a number of universities from New Jersey in this interesting coalition, because that's clearly what it takes. All of you have spoken to the fact that, it's not an either or, it's not an isolation piece, we're not trying to elbow each other out of the way, but the modern way of leadership on transnational issues is coalitions. Rutgers has been leading, this idea that you look to, again, different levels within your own structure to really push on these issues. Can you speak a little bit about that and your use of data and really, making things measurable?
Yeah, we are Moneyball types. We believe that the facts matter. Yeah. And you saw that certainly in war. You certainly saw it with the COVID pandemic, and we manage based on the data and based on the numbers. We are blessed with some extraordinary institutions of higher education with massive research budgets. Rutgers, our state university, being a great example. I appreciate your wearing orange for Princeton University, which is...
I went to Brown. I'm doing it wrong.
I know. I didn't go there either, but it's a badge of honor. And we're an innovation economy. Yeah. So we are we live in the tech, telecom, biopharma, life sciences space. We take advantage of our talent and our location. And again, you're operating, as the mayor knows, you're operating in a framework at one level, but you have enormous latitude at another level. And again, that latitude really matters in a positive way if you're adding to federal endeavors where you see an administration that shares your values, and you can amplify, accelerate the aspiration to achieve those values. And you also have the latitude, alternatively, to push back. We are increasingly, and I say this with a heavy heart, we are increasingly a patchwork quilt country. It matters really where you live and work.
Yeah.
If you care about reproductive freedom, about gun safety, voting rights, LGBTQIA, the environment, whatever it might be, and in that respect as well. So, you know, you stand up proudly for your values and you remind folks what the proposition is in your state. And again, you've got enormous latitude to do all of the above.
And maybe in that context, we should mention that the genesis of this, I think, critical function within the U.S. Department of State came out of a bipartisan effort, which is somewhat rare now in the United States. I want to invite all of you in the room to join our conversation, but also everybody outside of this room watching at home. You see I'm technologically equipped here, so if you want to send in your questions to join this conversation, please do. If there's a question in the room right now, please raise your hand, flag it. I think we have microphones that will allow us to amplify your voice. Oh, right in the front row, fantastic. Please introduce yourself, let us know, thank you.
Hello. Well, thank you particularly Mayor Herbst, and I'm so happy to meet you here again. So today, one of the model is developing, twin sister city, something like.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of Western cities and has a twin sister city with some authoritarian country like Russia, China. If I'm not wrong, today, for example, Berlin, and still is it sister city with Beijing and Moscow.
The Moscow relationship has ended.
Is ended, okay,
Yes.
It's good, but still in the Beijing. So this government, Putin, Xi Jinping, Putin is now, it's a whole, all the people know, all the world know, is a whole dangerous of the humanity, world peace. And today is Xi Jinping behind also, and Putin. Today Xi Jinping commit genocide against Uyghur. More than 3 million Uyghurs are suffering concentration camp, 21st century. And today Hong Kong democracy is over.
Right.
Crackdown. And Xi Jinping maybe now is threatened to the Taiwanese sovereignty. In the situation is and Berlin and the whole continue and the sister city with Beijing, Prague is already ended this twin sister with Beijing, and it is just with twin sister cities just economic benefit, or should be there is some democratic value also important?
You've really laid into a number of critical questions. The degree to which sister cities, as many of you know, were programs that were, depending on where you were in the world, started after World War II, accelerated then, oftentimes were not directly matched. You're pointing out that there are differences now. Cities are allying in networks that are interest-driven, but these ethical conflicts are coming up. Conflicts of information. We see, you know, I work a lot on technology governance. We now have an iron tech curtain going up, of course, between Russia and China on the one hand and the West on the other. And I wonder to this audience, what roles should cities be cutting off their ties to authoritarian governments, or are cities away, getting to the urban diplomacy piece in the coalition contract, in a way to keep dialogue open with the people, because you need people to talk to one another. Niels.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's up to every mayor and city council to decide. And obviously, it's not the time to celebrate a sister city partnership with the Russian city in that very context. I cannot imagine that I don't know any German city doing that. Maybe
Right.
I'm missing something. But from my development point of view, without, you know, interfering in any single decision by a mayor, but we have an overall interest in sharing and working on solutions together. And it's hard to imagine that we will reach the SDGs, that we will fight climate change, that we will be able to manage that development towards metropolitan, highly dense areas without having an exchange and interaction and a discussion also with China and with other authoritarian states. We need to be very clear here. There's a political level, but there's also the level of an overall interest. in finding solution. And that's why, without getting too much into detail, I would always think this is very political, and every mayor knows that. But it's also good to support a platform, which we're doing, in supporting UN Habitat, for example, and other organizations that have the legitimacy and the knowledge and the resources to do what we need to do. And so there's no easy answer, but I think the cooperation in times where we have geopolitical challenges, where we have real climate challenges, where we're falling behind and fighting against poverty, where we just had a pandemic, that needs to be on the agenda, that kind of cooperation. And sometimes there's an opportunity also for I'm using the substate level last time, but there's an opportunity sometimes because it does not have the same it does not have the same political exposure.
Right.
And sometimes you can have a conversation on a level where, because of the geopolitical situation, a foreign minister can or should not do that.
Well, this is particularly interesting in this context because before arriving in Munich, we were all speculating whether Secretary Blinken was going to meet his Chinese counterpart on Balloon Gate and going forward. But if you look at all the national security, and I'm going to come to you, Mayor, not to worry. But if you look at all the, national security strategy, national defense strategy describing China, of course, as a pacing power, systemic rival in the German case. But Niels is right, we still have to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. There are very critical things we need to get done. China has some of the fastest growing cities that have to address particularly problems of pollution and air issues. And then we have supply chain issues. Nina, what are you, as you're now working with cities who are also negotiating, and we have some pernicious examples in Germany as well, where the Chinese state has come in and targeted cities and made major economic investments that have then created problems of national security. That's a complicated lens to work through. How are you advising cities, American cities, working with them on these issues?
When cities approach us about a Chinese engagement, whether it be a sister city or some other engagement, we give them the facts. And that's what we do, and then it's up to them to decide. But we lay out what we think China's intentions are, and we give some examples of some troubling activities that the PRC is engaged in at the local level in the United States and around the world. But it's ultimately up to the mayor to decide, as Niels has said, whether the human rights issues and the risks outweigh or don't outweigh the potential benefits, which could be a climate cooperation project or a purely cultural exchange. But that's what we do. We bring in our experts and we brief the city or the state that's interested.
Mayor, you were particularly asked to weigh in on this, and I know you've had some interesting experiences in this regard.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm thinking about where to start from. However, yes, we have already ended our relationship with Beijing. It was not like we stand and said, we don't like you. We tried to renegotiate the agreement we had historically with them, because it included this article number 3, which was talking about one China policy. And the point is that such thing has no place in city-to-city agreements, because it's a level of a foreign affairs policy on a level of the nation. So we wanted to leave this out, but we started to negotiate with them about this. They started to ignore us. Then they start to bully us. They bullied our orchestras that have musical orchestras, classic music orchestras who have Prague in their name. It had almost absurd extension. For example, they bullied also an orchestra who is called the Prager's Quartet. However, the Prager is not the name of the city in this case, it's the name of the founder of the orchestra. However, we have gone through this, and after that we simply decided to cancel this relationship. However, yes, the problem is, the point is that specifically in Eastern Europe, the influence of China was overestimated, I would say. Because when we started to renegotiate this with the Beijing administration, we were facing questions like, do you know how this will damage the economics, that the tourists will not come, well, and so on. Well, actually, Prague is suffering from over-tourism. We have more tourists than we could actually handle in the city. And if we would lost all the Chinese tourists, this was back in 2019, before COVID. If we would have lost them all, it would mean that the level of tourism would drop 2 years back to the level of 2017. It would mean actually nothing for the city. And yes, the problem is that, and it's not just a value thing in this matter. I know that human rights could sound rather abstract in some cases, but the fact is that China is running concentration camps for Uyghurs and other minorities, and like real concentration camps, like you could see in documents from the Second World War. And I think this place really does not have any place in the 21st century. So Governor Murphy have said this 1 + 1 could equal to 3 if you're swimming the same way. But the point is that during the previous years, we were not swimming exactly the same way on the sub-national or governor and mayor level and on the national level in Czech Republic. And that was also one of the reasons why the Pact of Free Cities have been founded. The situation changed in Slovakia and Czech Republic since then, because later back then we had Miloš Zeman as a president. He was very pro-China, very pro-Russian. Now we have a new president elected, Petr Pavel, and but the situation is still pretty the same, for example, in Hungary. So that means that sometimes the subnational level, or mayors and governors level, could be agenda setter in some cases, and therefore it is also why is the subnational level of foreign relations so important.
I want to at some point talk about other components of power, which is money and finances, and how we use that in connecting and making resources available on the SDGs, but also on the Ukraine question. But I see a hand right over here, well hidden. Bring a female voice into this conversation.
Thank you, Suzanne Zels from the Robert Bosch Foundation. We partner with the MSC to bring human security issues here. And my question to the panel is, especially in Germany, I feel right now there's a lot of criticism of substate actors, of the disconnect of national or international policy with the local impact it has, especially on human security issues such as migration or climate change. So what role do you see for substate actors in those global or national decision-making processes, and how would we maybe also need to adapt those decision-making processes to provide a bigger role and really bring in that also practical knowledge and experience from how to resolve human security issues on the ground?
So Niels, inevitably I'm going to start with you, but I'll ask Nina and Governor Murphy to weigh in on this as well.
Look, we as a country would not be able to deal with the current situation. We still have roughly 800,000 Syrian refugees in Germany. We opened our doors to, I think, more than 1 million Ukrainians right now who have access to all the services that German citizens have.
And the labor market.
And the labor market. And it's a real challenge. And mayors, governors or prime ministers in the German system are demanding more action from the federal level right now. And there's a huge discussion ongoing. But
And we should add there was a sort of denial or freeze of that transfer of funds just a few days ago for those of us watching this from an international perspective.
Catherine, I don't think we have enough time to explain the German system of financial negotiation here. But you know, without that substate level, that would not have been possible.
Yeah.
And Germany is an interesting case because we are a major donor when it comes to UNHCR, to other international organizations, but we're also a host country of refugees. And that gives us, I believe, a certain credibility in that international discussion. And we are trying also to address the demands of our labor market when it comes to migration, but we also want to make a contribution, and that's going into the direction of your question, to countries who have an interest to send a skilled labor force to Germany, to organize that kind of migration in a humane and dignified way, and knowing that it's always a circular development.
Right.
People are coming, people are going back. We need to keep in mind that there needs to be a contribution to regional development as well. Who is implementing that? Who has the knowledge, the experience? That's usually the municipalities, the cities, and the states. So we're trying to include them into our political strategies.
So we got to this negotiation of resources and knowledge and exchange. Nina, in the American context, how does that play out?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and you're really putting your finger on a tricky issue. I'll just say that there are a couple of city networks that I know are trying to get their voices heard in UN negotiations. Like there's one called the Mayor's Migration Council, which is appealing and had some kind of a voice in the compacts that the UN was negotiating over refugees and migrants a few years back. Also, the big mayors organization UCLG also has been working on the UN on having a voice. And I'll say that the SecGen, and I don't know how formal or informal it is, but has a group of mayors that he consults on climate change issues. So bit by bit, but these are all, the UN is a creature of nation states, so it's very difficult to get kind of representation at that local level. Just a couple quick other points. China's cities do not have any autonomy the way Western and many other cities do around the world. So they have to toe the party line. So that makes them different than other cities almost everywhere else. And I would say that on democracy, there's practical things that cities do for democracy too. They deliver. And when they deliver without corruption and without, and they deliver efficiently and effectively using data, that is proving that the democratic system can work. And they also nurture politicians when there may be an opposition to the nation state, and they keep the traditions and the norms and the conventions of democracy alive. States and cities do that. So.
Interesting. We're going to have time for about 2 more questions, and I'll filibuster while you're getting those questions ready. We'll go to you in just a second. But because this has now come up, and I want Governor Murphy to come in on this, we'll talk about financial resources in a second. But Governor Murphy, go ahead.
Yeah, I heard part of your question, in one of the commonalities between being a diplomat and a governor is the influence you can have or cannot have, as the case may be, on the national policy. There's a great anecdote that involves George Shultz, the late Secretary of State, who became a mentor and friend of ours later in his life. He would call ambassadors in to his office just before they were sent out to their host countries, and there'd be 2 parts to the conversation. First, he would say, he had a huge globe in his office, and he would say, quick, show me your country. And 9 out of 10 of the ambassadors would point to where they were going. He would spin the globe around, he'd put his finger in Kansas and say, this is your country, and don't you ever forget that. And the second part of the conversation was, you're going to be great, but remember one thing, policy is made in Washington, not where you're going to be. Similarly, Governor, I mentioned we've served during the Trump administration and the Biden administration. In both administrations, there's an ample opportunity to influence national or international policies. You may not always agree, and obviously with Trump we had a lot of areas where we disagreed, but there is a real give and take, just as When you're an ambassador, while the policy is being made in Washington, you have input into that. While policy is being made at the federal level as a governor, as a mayor, you have, without question in our system, influence toward that. And I think that's a dynamic that gets underestimated, particularly when you have opposition parties. Folks used to be shocked that we had a very constructive relationship with President Trump. The fact is, you have no choice. You're in one bathtub, whether you like it or not, and you got to do the best you can to influence it. That's an analogy you probably are all cringing about out
We'll
there.
take the bathtub metaphor into the rest of the day. I can already feel it in the room. You have a question.
Thanks for all your supporting of Ukraine. I'm an international journalist from Ukraine, and I'm also involved in the process of city diplomacy because I'm an assistant of secretary of the city council in Uzhgorod. This is a city near the Hungarian and Slovakian border. I have one question to Mayor of Prague and one question to Vitaly Klitschko concerning Vladimir. Sorry, it's a very for me even difficult to distinguish them. Concerning the city diplomacy, you know that I met with Mayor of Lugano in Switzerland. I met with city councillors in Innsbruck in Austria and many countries and cities in European Union and Europe. It's not difficult to establish such kind of relations between Ukrainian cities and the European because, unfortunately, it's a political step. So they may ask what will be the benefits for our own city, for the people who live there, if we establish some kind of relations with Ukrainian city in the east, in the south, or in the west of Ukraine. And concerning my famous politician, what is the general estimation of München conference? What is the particular distinguish can you estimate in supporting of Ukraine in this year, in these days? What you're feeling about new level of support in Ukraine, or we don't see any new level, just ordinary support, political support, and what next?
I have one more question over here. I think that we're going to come. Are you good? Do you want to ask a question? We have a microphone coming to you, and then we'll finish with this round of questions, and I'll get last words from our panel.
Thank you. Hello. Okay. My name is Rebecca Bart. I'm the correspondent in Ukraine for Germany's first channel, ARD. And I just wanted to ask if we could maybe include Mr. Klitschko to the discussion.
Right back,
and the question is, like, what can we talked about partnerships programs. Many cities in your country are actually being destroyed at the moment. So what can partner cities do at the very moment to support these heavily destroyed cities?
And particularly on the financial aid piece, because one thing in the German case, when sister cities had Ukrainian sister cities and built that into their budget, they could make help come to you as fast as possible. Not true so much for some other cities. So that's exactly the question that's now been raised twice. What more needs to happen? How do we get more aid, particularly quick, financial, effective aid to you through the lens of cities?
And that's actually what actually happened already with Hamburg. Just in the beginning of the invasion, Hamburg got united, in this case, as a sister city of Kyiv. And it was a signal for Prague, for Madrid, Warsaw, and that decision was made quick. And that's why decentralization is so critically important, and the communication between the cities, not just in one country, but also between the other countries. So those decisions could go faster. And that happened not just making decision to be united with someone like Hamburg and Kyiv, and I was like one of the founders of this initiative, but it's also a decision to stop, as it was between Beijing and Prague, to stop the relationship to the sister city from the past, maybe with a long, many decades history. And that was a good example where cities on a level, not really like governmental level, takes time to make any decision. And we see that with the support of Ukraine. Speaking also of my countrymen, what is Munich security what is happening here is unbelievably important to be here, present here, and to have direct connection to all the allies of the free world that we're completely depending on right now as Ukraine. And I want to mention also just one case, which is painful to observe, that one of the mayors of the cities was called off to be a mayor of Chernihiv, due to senseless, in my opinion, senseless blame of evacuating his family, children, and so and wife, evacuating by a car that was kind of connected with the city council. So there was like a lot of it was just panic in those days. And you make decisions that are important, and you just evacuate families of your countrymen and women, of your city, as well as your own family. So, and Mayor of Chernihiv was basically called off being a mayor for the next, I don't know, a year, or whatever the consequences is. But that's our internal politics in Ukraine. But it is important to be here. It is important to have direct connection to different levels and different people responsible for humanitarian help of Ukraine and military help. I'm not going to get into details, but this Munich Security Conference was extremely important for Ukraine for the next steps as well. And I wish, and I have a dream, that at the next conference, next year, we will stop talking about how great Ukrainians are. You didn't fail in 3 days, neither in 5 days. And this observation, and in the sport where I'm coming from, speed kills. That's what we say in boxing. But also speed with help and support of Ukraine saves lives, saves infrastructure, saves cities. And the mayors of the cities that have been stolen, killed, murdered already, and it's still going and continuing. And that's why it is my dream, and dream probably of many of you, that at the next Munich Security Conference, we're going to talk about the war as about the past, and make sure for the future that our decisions be made in the future faster. And this hesitation and flirting with Russia will stop, and Belarus, not to forget, will stop eventually. And that's going to be a prevention for the future conflicts and future destruction of life and infrastructure and Mother Nature as well. I hope this dream will come true. And next year we're going to meet here again with all of you, and maybe some more of you, and we'll talk about it, how to rebuild Ukraine and how to improve our bilateral relationship between the cities, between the countries, and how can we make this world a better place and make decisions with the consequences. Because if you don't know the consequences, you just will do whatever you want to do. Those consequences must occur, and military tribunal must be full with those people who today are killing us Ukrainians. And not just us Ukrainians, but trying to kill the democratic principles of the countries where we're living in. And I'm sorry, and I'm going to finish this. We think and talk about democracy. We're discussing about how we can improve and how we can react, and also with the consequences. It is absolutely important to understand how much joy we have to live in democracy. We talk about democracy, but we don't know what it feels like. And it's so great. So please, keep on supporting us in Ukraine, because we are you, and you are us. We're reflecting you, and we're fighting for you. Amen. And we're doing it with the heart and love, obsession that we're standing for. It's extreme shape of love. And doesn't matter what is in the front of us, one of the strongest armies in the world, or weapons, our will is indestructible, because it's our will of us, free world. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the long monologue.
That's great.
Awesome.
In this room shares this hope. I think the fact that every single reconstruction plan or idea I have seen for Ukraine begins with a role for cities, because we've seen that cities are the places that know how to get it done to create the vibrant democracy. When you started speaking, I saw the images of the Maidan again. That was the first, fundamental threat to Vladimir Putin, is that people are cohesive, people are together, they're in the city streets, and they're understanding the value of lived democracy. The Abercrombie plan for London was put in place 2 years before World War II ended. So now is the time to start replanning. Now is the time to put all of our joint efforts as cities, as sub-nation states, entities, into your efforts. We're here for you. We support you. We're with you. Thank you all for being here. That was a pleasure. Thank you.